In this video, we're going to show you how we take our vectorized logo and convert it into an embroidery file. Now, if you've not watched our previous video on taking the image that was provided by the customer, turning it into a vector-based outline file, um, you can watch that video. I have a link to that video in the description below. And now we're going to take our vectorized logo and convert it to embroidery stitches. So this logo is 3.5 inches wide and is going to consist entirely of satin stitches. So we cannot have any fill objects when we're dealing with satin. And in this case, you can see everything has a stroke applied to the shape. This is the look of our shapes here. So those are our shapes, and you can see we have a fill, or a stroke rather, applied to all of our shapes. So now we have to go about converting it into embroidery. Well, how do we do this? Well, this is going to be really simple to get our embroidery stitches. So just follow along here. So what we're going to do, we're going to start by these little wing shapes. So we're going to double click on the wing shape. And you see this wing consists of one node up top and one node at the bottom. So it doesn't get much easier than that. So we're going to select that node. Let's get rid of our transformation handles. Sometimes those are just in the way. But we're going to click Shift B. Shift B. And what that does is that breaks at the selected node. It breaks it. And we have two rails. So the embroidery stitches will be able to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We can illustrate this point further by choosing to break apart our shape, and I just want to show you. If I switch over here, you see how, well, first of all, let's go back in here and hit Shift B, and then we are going to break that apart. And now I can show you that this piece is separate from this piece. Two rails, okay? But we do have to have those combined. So they're still two separate pieces because we broke that node at the top and broke that node at the bottom. So let's go ahead and do that with all of these. So we select this node, shift click, and then Shift B, break it nodes. We don't really see anything happen when we do break it, so just be mindful of that. Shift B, and then we'll do the same thing over here. We'll select this one, shift select, and B, Shift B, Shift B all the way through. Shift B, and then finally we Shift B. Okay? Now all of these shapes have now been Shift B'd, so now we are ready to convert these into embroidery stitches. So I'm just going to go through and select them all. There we go. And then let's go into extensions and choose InkStitch and params. We have a keyboard shortcut to get into params at Control-Alt-P, which is always nice to have. Certain keyboard shortcuts for very often used functions. Now my computer is a little bit slow sometimes getting into params the first time that we go into params for some reason, but then thereafter it's pretty quick. So here we go. Now you see here there is a satin column tab, and if you do have a satin column tab, what that tells you is that the object that you have selected is not set up to convert to satin. Otherwise you would have a satin column option. I don't know if the InkScape or InkStitch people are listening, but I wish it would default to satin column, because I use satin way more than I use stroke, and it always defaults to stroke, and I wish it didn't. But, or at least I wish it was configurable to always, if the satin conditions are met, to always default to satin. But anyhow, we'll go ahead and choose the custom satin column here, and you will see all of our shapes switch over to satin. Now, one thing you'll also notice that the satins are all perfecto. And the reason that they're all perfecto is because of the vectorizing process. when you watch that video, we kind of explain about notes and things like that. So we did a lot of the pre-work to get perfect results here um, on the embroidery side because of the work that we did over on the other portion of it when we created the artwork. So these are fairly fat satin columns. So that's something else we should talk about real quick. So let's choose apply. Let's go to our measure tool, the M key on our keyboard, and take a look at how wide these satin columns are. Now this is 9 millimeters, a satin column. And generally speaking, we would not want that to be that much, okay? Um, that's a very long satin column. Certainly anything over 9 we wouldn't want to do. And this to me is a bit of a stretch. So I'll show you some options that we have available to us, but just kind of keep that in mind that that is really, really wide. But let's go back into params and show you some things that we can do to kind of mitigate that a little bit and show you what I'm talking about here. So these are very wide satin columns, which I knew they were going to be. If we were going to stitch this on a cap, that 9 millimeter wouldn't be so bad. But this is, potentially going on a polo or something. So one of the things that we definitely are going to want to do is we're definitely going to want to have some zigzag underlay. That's no doubt. So we'll go ahead and add our zigzag underlay. The other thing that we're going to want to do is I would add some contour underlay. So we're going to do that too. And the contour underlay is that little outline. So that's taken care of. And the defaults for those two, I think, are okay for this particular example. But back on the satin column tab, the one thing I do want to add is I do want to add some pull compensation. Now, how much pull compensation? Well, that you kind of got to get a feel for. It depends on the garment that you're stitching on and so forth. But I'm going to show you an extreme example of pull compensation. So we're going to add 50% to each side. And I want to show you when it calculates that, you see how far our satin stitches are beyond the contour underlay, okay? So that's kind of crazy, right? That's in a crazy amount. So this percentage will differ depending on how wide the satin column is to begin with. If it's very narrow, we're adding a percentage. We could add it by a millimeter option too. So if we want 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters, whatever you want. So sometimes I will use percentage, sometimes I will use a set amount. So for example, if I come down here to do 2, and this is not going to be 50%, we're just going to do 2, then it's going to add 2 millimeters beyond that, okay? So at any rate, I typically settle on 10 to 15%. I'll try 15 and see what that looks like. I'm going to back it off to 10. I think 10's fine. Yes, I like 10. So we're gonna stick with 10, and I think that will look nice. And like I said, you'll have to play with that a little bit. Stitch one out, see what you like, and if you like it, good, run with it. Okay, so that takes care of that. So let's choose apply and quit, and then we have to take a look at what we're going to do here for this portion. Oh, actually, I want to show one other thing I forgot. In regards to the 9 millimeter satin column. Remember, we don't really want a 9 millimeter satin column. That is a bit extreme. But we can do something that's kind of interesting. So what I want to do is let's look at our needle penetration points to illustrate this point. So you see these little blue circles? This is where the needle is going to go from side to side, side to side, side to side, okay? And so it's going to jump from this side all the way over to that side, okay? 9 millimeters. That is a big jump for an embroidery machine to make. Okay, so what are our other options? Well, we can, if we look here, there are lots of options in this custom satin column. So you just kind of go through here and take a look and see. Um, there's a split method here where we could split the column, and you can see it says the default, simple, or staggered, or there is an option here. It says random jitter for split stitches, and there is should be, let's see here, should be an option. Let me find it here. To right here, maximum stitch length, to set the maximum amount of stitch length that we want. So we know that our satin column is 9 millimeters, but maybe we have it in our minds, well, we don't want any satin stitches that are longer than 4 millimeters. Okay, so we'll take a look and see what it does here. So now you see all these extra needle points. These blue lines are all extra needle points, but they're very defined. And if we were to stitch this out in this manner, you would see like a very distinct line amongst your satin. And that's where the random jitter comes into play. Okay, so we'll leave the maximum stitch length set to 4 millimeters, but the split method here, it's currently set at default. Let's see what happens if we choose staggered. So now you can see that all those extra needle points, there's a bunch of them, but it looks more uniform and defined. Okay, so let's go back to default here. Well, let's see what simple does. I've never really used the split method before. Okay, well, I can tell you right now, I don't like that, right? Because these are very defined needle penetrations, so we don't like that. I don't mind the staggered. Let's go back to default here. I want to look at something here. So right now we have 4,530, and if I go back to staggered, what do we have? 4,800. So it does add a few hundred extra needle penetrations, but ultimately this will give us a better look. So I am going to use default, but down here I'm going to introduce this, which is the random jitter for split stitches, and then we could set a percentage. So for example, let's do 50% random jitter, and you'll see what that does. It's going to be very similar to what we had in the staggered split method. You can see we have the same number of stitches, so we have fewer stitches, but you can see the penetrations are very random, but we've not increased the number of stitches, so that's kind of a give and take. And then we could do, let's go ahead and I don't know, the random phase for split stitches. Maybe we'll go ahead and turn that on. And it looks like there's also a minimum length for the random phase split stitches. It's definitely different than what we had previously, and you can see that it's added about 500 stitches in the process also. So you can take that for what it's worth. I don't know. I think instead of using random jitter, I think I do like that staggered split method. And then, so now we know that none of these stitches are more than 4 millimeters in length. So it'll still look like we have satin, but we'll have very wide satin. So anytime we're dealing with very wide satin, we want to make sure that we're using the staggered split method and or the random jitter, one or the other. Let's see here. Stagger split stitches this many times before repeating. I don't know if that was one of the defaults or if I did that. I don't think I did that, but we'll just leave it the way it is. I think it's okay, just the way it is. I don't know what I did there. Accidentally reversed the rails. All right, so there is that part taken care of. I'm happy with that, okay? Okay, so now we can go ahead and take a look at how we're going to handle the satin stitches here. And we're going to do kind of the same thing, except what we're going to do here is going to be just a little bit different. We are going to select that segment and come up here, and then we're going to choose this option right here, delete segment between non-endpoint nodes. Okay, so we'll do that, and then do the same thing here. Okay, so now this should be ready to convert into satin stitches. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we have our 2 rails, our satin column, create custom satin column, and there we go. There's our satin stitches. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did previously. We are going to add some zigzag underlay. We are going to add our contour underlay. Okay, and then we'll go back to our satin column. All that looks pretty good. We want let's see here. Let's go back. We are going to add 10% of the pull compensation. So we've got that set up. And then, let's see here. Our maximum stitch length here, we want to be 4 millimeters. And then for our split method, we're going to do staggered. We'll turn on our needle points here. And there we go. We'll choose apply and quit. And now that one's taken care of. And then we just need to do the exact same thing up top here. So we're going to select that segment and delete it. And come over here and select that segment and delete it. And now this is ready to go to convert to satin. And then we're going to go ahead and redo those same steps. But I do want to point something out to you that you definitely want to consider. So we'll go over here to custom satin column. And remember, we are going to add 10% of pull compensation. We are going to add our zigzag underlay. We are going to add our contour underlay. Come back over here to satin column. We're going to set our maximum stitch length to 4 millimeters. And we're going to set our split method to staggered. Okay, so if that's the certain settings that you like to use quite a bit, oh, we got a problem right here we're going to have to fix. You see that? So let's go ahead and choose apply and quit before I talk about our next point. So there is a problem there, and that problem is probably a node on top of a node. Sure enough, there it is, node on top of a node. So now when we go in there, 2 params, we'll have proper satin stitches there. If anytime you see something amiss, you see how our zigzag is perfect. Anytime you see something amiss here, in params where your satin stitches or your underlay or something is not looking right, it's always because there's a problem with the artwork. And in our case, there was one node sitting directly on top of itself. So anyhow, just to kind of recap, we've got pull compensation, we have zigzag, we have contour. You notice that these stitches are going kind of pretty far away from the contour, so we may want to back off this pull compensation to say 6%, and now the stitches aren't quite as far away from the contour. We are using the staggered split method with no more than 4 millimeters. We can see we have all those needle penetrations. All that's really good. So we're happy with everything. But this is the thing I wanted to point out. If there's certain settings that you use all the time, notice that you can add presets. So the next time you create a similar setup, you can just click on that, and all of those settings with the zigzag and the contour and the staggered and the 4 millimeter, anytime we're dealing with wide satin stitches, so we might call that wide satin stitch preset, and then you can add that as a preset, and you'll have all of the same settings that you had previously. And also notice this button here, it says use last settings. So when we did the one section and moved to the next, we could have just clicked that instead of adding zigzag and contour and 10% and blah, blah, blah. It would have just applied the last settings that we used. So pretty handy little options there as well. All right. So there it is. That is our completed look. So now what we're going to do is let's do a preview of this. So go under extensions. There's two. So converting it to stitches is one part of the process, but now we have even another issue, and that is the fact that it's not set up to properly stitch just yet. So if we come in here to InkStitch and we come down here to visualize and choose, we could choose the simulator. Let's go into simulator. We don't know exactly what order this is going to stitch in just yet. And so you can see, because we never set that, right? So you can see it's kind of all over the place. So the stitch order is not 100%. So that's problem number one. But also, if we turn on our frogs, you can see we have lots of jump stitches. So let's fix our stitch order first. So the way we fix stitch order is we're going to go from here to here to here, and then we'll come, then we'll do maybe this one, and this one. So we'll call that our stitch order. So you go to extensions, InkStitch, edit, restack objects in the order of selection. Okay, so then we want this to stitch next, which it does, and then we want this to stitch next, which it does. So now, when we go into the simulator mode, I have a keyboard shortcut for simulator, which is Control-Alt-S. You see the order in which these are stitching. So that's good, but if we turn on the frogs, you could see we have all of these frogs. And we don't want to, ideally, we don't want to have any frogs. If we click on the Info tab, you're going to see that we have 7 thread jumps, we have no thread trims. So that is not what we want to have happen. So how do we fix this problem? Well, that is another whole piece of the puzzle. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here on this video because I like to do the routing and pathing in a separate video. So if you just want to learn how to route and path the design properly for proper stitch out, then you can look at just that one segment. So I'm going to stop it here. We've got all of our stitches essentially the way we want them. Our next step is to route and path our design. So I'll leave a link to that video in the video description below, so you can check that out as well. Thanks for watching.